Have you ever wondered why the quiet moments feel heavier than the chaos of the world? Some women spend lifetimes running from the echo of their own thoughts, seeking validation in the eyes of others, never daring to sit alone with the shadows that dwell beneath the surface. There's a peculiar courage in stillness, a dangerous grace that stirs the psyche when one faces the unadorned self. In these moments, the mirror does not lie. The patterns of attraction, the compulsions to please, the ghostly pull of unhealed wounds, all rise to the surface, demanding acknowledgement. It is here that the female soul, archetypal and timeless, confronts the duality of desire and fear, strength and vulnerability. The pull of external attention can be intoxicating, like a fire that warms and burns simultaneously. A woman, observing her own reflection in the eyes of those who admire her, may mistake this transient glow for self-worth. Yet Jung whispered to the corridors of consciousness that the ego's hunger for recognition is a thief of inner peace. The projection of worth onto others' perceptions masks a deeper fracture, one born of childhood echoes, unspoken trauma, and the persistent whisper of inadequacy. To sit still with oneself is to dismantle these illusions, to meet the shadow without flinching and to feel for the first time the raw contour of authentic being. There is a peculiar tension between solitude and loneliness. Many mistake the latter for the former, fleeing into relationships, validation, and fleeting pleasures to avoid the discomfort of introspection. But the woman who begins to learn stillness discovers an uncanny clarity. The mind's chatter quiets, the heart's frantic pursuit softens, and a strange, almost sacred, alignment emerges between desire and presence. It is not emptiness but fullness, not absence but awakening. Each thought, each pang of longing is observed, acknowledged, and released like leaves drifting down a silent river. This is the first taste of freedom, the realization that attachment to approval, to another's reflection of oneself, is optional. Imagine if you were to watch yourself from above, like a silent witness to every impulse, every craving for affirmation, every moment when the heart seeks outside for what can only be nourished within. In the stillness, the patterns of attraction become visible. The subtle dance between ego and shadow, the magnetic pull of desire mingled with fear, the unconscious scripts inherited from generations of women who learned to diminish themselves for survival. These threads, once tangled and invisible, begin to unravel, revealing the contours of a psyche both delicate and ferocious. The woman who sits with herself learns that every reaction she has is a mirror, every longing a doorway, every discomfort a teacher, inviting her to cross into territories of self-knowledge that society often forbids. There's seductive mythology in surrender. The world tells women to act, to perform, to charm, to be seen. Yet the soul whispers in a quieter tongue. To be still is to wield a power far beyond superficial influence. Emotional behavioral patterns, once unquestioned, now emerge under the patient gaze of self-observation. One notices a compulsive need to explain, to justify, to be understood, a subtle addiction to the attention of others, a pact with a world that measures worth externally. And as the recognition deepens, a strange liberation takes root. The need to chase approval begins to dissolve, replaced by the intoxicating knowledge that one's presence alone, in all its complex, shadow-laden entirety, is enough. Even as the mind resists whispering fears, resurrecting old insecurities, there's a quiet revolution in the soul. Every fleeting urge to compare, to envy, to grasp, is met with gentle awareness. The psyche learns to hold its own gaze, to witness without judgment, to encounter longing without surrender. Shadow work unfolds not as a task, but as an initiation. Into patience, into self-respect, into a wisdom that only solitude can teach. Here, The interplay of masculine and feminine energies within the self is revealed. The animus, that inner masculine guide, offers discernment and courage. The anima, that deep feminine current, nurtures intuition and empathy. The dialogue between these forces, once ignored or distorted, becomes a symphony of inner alignment, a map toward emotional sovereignty. Today, perhaps more than ever, the world clamors for immediate connection, for endless performance, for attention at all costs. In this cacophony, the act of being still with oneself is revolutionary. It is a quiet defiance against a culture that confuses busyness with purpose, distraction with healing. The woman who sits with her own pulse begins to notice the subtle tremors of her desires, not the loud, performative ones, but the whispered yearnings that have long been ignored. These are the desires that do not seek validation. They are the truths of the soul, the impulses that reflect authentic calling rather than social expectation. By acknowledging them, she takes the first step toward self-possession, toward a sovereignty of feeling that no external gaze can disturb. There is a painful beauty in this process. Old attachments rise like ghosts, relationships that were never reciprocal, friendships that drained rather than nurtured, compulsions that masked unprocessed trauma. Each memory, each pang of regret, is a doorway into deeper understanding. Modern psychology calls it integration. Jung called it individuation, the careful weaving together of fractured parts into a coherent, powerful self. And yet, the path is not linear. There are moments of dizziness, of grief, when the old habits of people-pleasing and over-giving threaten to reclaim their grip. In these moments, a woman must lean into the stoic discipline of presence, observing the store without judgment, understanding that suffering is not a punishment but a teacher. Marcus Aurelius' words echo here. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Within this space, attraction dynamics take on a new clarity. One sees how projection shapes relationships, how the neediness of the ego often masquerades as desire, how the pull toward unavailable partners is rarely about them and always about the unintegrated self. The woman learning stillness begins to discern the difference between genuine connection and a mirror-seeking trap. Each emotional trigger becomes a lens through which the inner landscape is mapped. The heart, once scattered and anxious, grows disciplined in its attention, free from the tyranny of external validation. She learns to wait, to choose, to receive without desperation, to observe without reaction. And in this patience, she finds a power far more magnetic than anything learned through performance or seduction. Some women, when confronted with their own silence, discover a paradox. The stillness that feels empty is in truth overflowing. Each moment of introspection becomes a crucible, burning away illusions that were once mistaken for identity. The psyche reveals its hidden architecture, the unacknowledged fears, the suppressed anger, the longing for approval, and the inherited scripts that have dictated patterns of love and attachment. In facing these truths without flinching, the woman begins to reclaim the fragments of herself that were scattered across other people's expectations. She sees how the ego often wears vulnerability like a mask, and how pain, when unexamined, is projected outward, creating cycles of misunderstanding and misalignment. The mastery of self begins not in accumulation but in subtraction. By releasing the need to explain, to justify, to perform, the woman uncovers a potency that is both fierce and serene. Each encounter with the world becomes a reflection rather than a demand. She recognizes a delicate tension between detachment and presence. Love can be given freely without dependency. Attention can be offered without need. The unconscious patterns that once drew her toward chaos are illuminated in the light of conscious observation. Here, the dialogue with the inner masculine, discernment, boundary, clarity, meets the inner feminine, intuition, receptivity, depth. The balance of these forces creates a rhythm that the world cannot dictate, a pulse that exists independently of admiration or rejection. In this emerging awareness, relationships are no longer arenas of validation, but laboratories of growth. The woman observed the interplay of attraction dynamics without fear, how desire can be manipulated, how ego projections distort perception, how emotional withholding can be both a shield and a snare. Every interaction becomes a teacher, every pause a lesson. Trauma psychology illuminates the importance of witnessing one's own patterns, of recognizing triggers without judgment, and of responding with conscious intention rather than reactive habit. The shadow, once feared as a dark and uncontrollable force, becomes an ally, its whispers guiding toward understanding, integration, and ultimately self-possession. How many women do you know who have measured their worth by the intensity of another's gaze, by the fleeting warmth of attention that fades as quickly as it arrives? In learning stillness, these illusions begin to crumble. The woman who sits with herself realizes that desire is not inherently dangerous, nor is independence lonely. Rather, it is the unexamined neediness, the projection of incompleteness onto another that distorts love and attraction. Each impulse, each ache for connection, is met with awareness, allowing the heart to expand without grasping, to feel without contracting. The shadows of past heartbreaks, disappointments, and betrayals no longer haunt in quiet. They illuminate. They reveal the templates that have governed her choices and invite her to rewrite them with deliberate intention. This process is not instantaneous. It is a slow unraveling of dependency, a patient dismantling of old habits. The psyche, like a finely tuned instrument, responds to observation and stillness. Emotional intelligence deepens, intuition sharpens, and the magnetic pull of authentic presence replaces the desperate lure of attention-seeking. The inner dialogue, once dominated by fear and doubt, becomes a steady companion, guiding choices, shaping boundaries, and clarifying desires. In these silent hours, profound truth emerges. Self-respect is not earned through others' validation. It is inherent, unwavering, and sovereign. The dynamics of attraction, when seen through this lens, transform. A woman no longer chases. She radiates. She recognizes the subtle cues of projection in others and honors them without compromise to her own integrity. The dance between the conscious and unconscious, the interplay of anima and animus, becomes a source of wisdom rather than confusion. Emotional triggers are met with measured curiosity, not reaction. The habits of overgiving, over-explaining, and over-investing dissolve, replaced by discernment, patience, and a magnetic presence that draws connection without need. Each choice, each pause, each observed longing strengthens the architecture of the self, creating a foundation impervious to fleeting approval. If a man's attention is sought as proof of worth, the lesson of stillness quickly becomes essential. The woman who cultivates presence realizes that desire, when untethered from need, is both freeing and illuminating. She observes how her own projections once color perception, how the longing to be seen, understood, or pursued created illusions of connection that were never grounded in truth. Through the lens of Jungian psychology, every attachment becomes a mirror, every attraction a reflection of unintegrated shadows. By confronting these reflections without fear, she disentangles herself from compulsions that have long dictated her choices. This disentanglement is not cold detachment. It is an awakening to the sovereignty of her own heart, the mastery of her own attention, the recognition that fulfillment is cultivated internally, not borrowed externally. The process demands courage. It requires witnessing the whispers of inadequacy that have haunted intimate spaces, the patterns of dependence learned through childhood, the repetitive scripts that have drawn her toward unbalanced relationships. Yet within this confrontation lies empowerment. Each uncomfortable truth observed, each longing acknowledged and released, reinforces a nascent strength, a quiet authority that does not clamor for validation. Emotional behavioral analysis shows that the more a woman tolerates her own stillness, the less she reacts from habitual impulse, the more she chooses from conscious intent. The shadows, once sources of shame or confusion, become guides, revealing the roots of attraction, the architecture of desire, and the pathways toward authentic connection. In embracing this inner alchemy, the heart discovers its own rhythm. The mind, once anxious and reactive, begins to settle into awareness. One notices how projection operates in subtle ways. The urge to rescue, the temptation to explain, the impulse to overinvest emotionally. These tendencies, once unconscious, are now observed, studied, and transformed. The interplay of feminine receptivity and masculine discernment within the self becomes a balanced dialogue rather than a battleground. Here, the woman realizes that the most profound magnetism arises not from pursuit or performance, but from presence, integrity, and self-possession. Her energy no longer seeks permission. It simply is radiant and sovereign, drawing what resonates and releasing what does not. Most women, when first faced with their own stillness, feel a tremor of fear. The world outside has long offered distractions, flattery, and noise to mask the emptiness of self-neglect. Yet in the silence, clarity emerges. Emotional wounds that once demanded constant soothing now ask only to be witnessed. Old patterns of attachment, clinging to approval, chasing love, fearing abandonment, reveal themselves like maps of uncharted territory. Shadow work, once a concept cloaked in esoteric language, becomes a tangible practice, observing impulses without judgment, acknowledging the echoes of trauma, discerning the difference between longing born of authenticity and longing born of scarcity. The power of being still is subtle but radical. It allows the woman to discern who she is when the mirrors of others are removed. Without performance, without charm, without expectation, the self reveals its raw contours, strengths, vulnerabilities, instincts, and shadows alike. This self-possession is magnetic, not through exertion but through authenticity. The psyche, freed from compulsive projection and reactive habit, begins to resonate with a higher frequency. Emotional behavioral patterns once repeated unconsciously, overgiving, over-explaining, over-investing, diminish under the steady gaze of awareness. Each moment acquired becomes a lesson in sovereignty, a practice in choosing presence over validation, depth over distraction. Here, the dialogue between the conscious and unconscious, the anima and animus, reaches a delicate equilibrium. The feminine depth of intuition and empathy harmonizes with the masculine clarity of discernment and boundary. Relationships, when they occur, are no longer arenas of compromise or desperate pursuit. They are laboratories of mutual resonance, interactions chosen consciously rather than reacted to unconsciously. Trauma-informed psychology underscores this. The more one tolerates and observes one's own inner landscape, the less one repeats the patterns of seeking validation from unreliable sources. A woman who cultivates stillness begins to recognize that what once felt like longing or emptiness is simply unclaimed power, waiting to be held. Has this ever happened to you? Feeling an ache for connection so strong that it clouds every other thought, only to realize later that the longing was a mirror of your own unclaimed self? In learning stillness, the woman discovers the subtle mechanics of desire and attachment. Every pull toward another becomes an opportunity to observe, not react. Each emotional tremor is a signal, a message from the unconscious, revealing where integration is incomplete, where shadow aspects remain unacknowledged, where old wounds still script present choices. By facing these truths, she begins to dissolve the compulsions that once dictated her relationships. The need to explain, to please, to anticipate another's desire. The clarity that emerges is a form of liberation, raw, uncompromising, and luminous. In this awakening, solitude is no longer a void but a sacred space. The mind, once restless and scattered, settles into a rhythm of observation and presence. One notices how past relational patterns, chasing unavailable partners, overinvesting emotionally, seeking validation and fleeting attention, were reflections of an incomplete internal world rather than flaws in others. Trauma psychology reinforces this. Recognition and integration of unprocessed emotional material rewires the heart's responses, allowing genuine connection without dependency. The woman in stillness begins to recognize that her energy is a powerful force, magnetic not because of performance or seduction, but because of authenticity, presence, and unshakable self-possession. Shadow work becomes a dance between courage and compassion. The impulses, fears, and desires that once seemed foreign now reveal their source in the psyche's layered architecture. The animus guides discernment, offering clarity in decisions and boundaries. The anima nurtures intuition, empathy, and receptivity. Each interaction with the outer world becomes a mirror, reflecting back the inner work achieved in silence. Emotional triggers, once reactive, are now met with curiosity and choice. The heart learns patience. The mind cultivates observation. The longing for external validation softens, replaced by an understanding that fulfillment is self-generated, cultivated within the depth of one's own being. There comes a moment when the accumulation of stillness transforms into something palpable, a quiet authority that is neither loud nor aggressive, but undeniably magnetic. In this state, the woman recognizes a subtle difference between craving and desire, between reaction and choice. She sees how her past attachments were colored by unconscious projections, how the need for approval shaped decisions and diluted her presence. The habitual reflex to chase, explain, or justify fades, replaced by an awareness that her energy is sovereign. Every pause, every measured response, every conscious breath becomes an act of power. In this space, emotional behavioral patterns are not suppressed. They are understood, integrated, and transformed into sources of wisdom. The psyche's architecture, once fractured by fear and longing, now begins to resonate in alignment. The inner masculine, discernment, clarity, boundary, supports the inner feminine, intuition, empathy, depth, in a dialogue of conscious cooperation. Attraction dynamics shift naturally. The woman no longer chases the gaze of another, no longer seeks validation through performance. Instead, presence radiates effortlessly, drawing in what resonates and releasing what does not. The shadow, once a source of shame or confusion, becomes an ally, guiding her through the labyrinth of desire and attachment. Each observed impulse, each confronted fear, strengthens the architecture of her selfhood, reinforcing independence and emotional sovereignty. In this alchemy, relationships are transformed into mirrors, not crutches. Each encounter is an opportunity to observe projection, to practice patience, to choose connection consciously rather than unconsciously. The compulsion to overgive, over-explain, or over-invest dissolves, leaving space for reciprocity and genuine resonance. The woman begins to understand that her worth was never contingent upon external recognition. Emotional freedom emerges not as absence, but as fullness, the ability to love, to connect, and a desire without fear or dependency. Stillness becomes a sanctuary, a laboratory of self-discovery, a crucible in which raw, unclaimed power is finally held and owned. A woman who has learned to be still with herself comes to recognize a profound truth. The external world can neither grant nor diminish her value. Each relationship, each fleeting attention, each whispered desire from another is observed without attachment, understood without compromise. The habits of the past, over-investing, chasing validation, sacrificing integrity for approval, have been dismantled in the quiet forge of self-observation. Shadow work, once feared as a confrontation with darkness, now serves as a guide, illuminating the hidden currents of attraction, fear, and unhealed wounds. The psyche, once scattered and reactive, now pulses with coherence and presence. In these final stages of awakening, the interplay between anima and animus achieves a delicate harmony. The animus provides discernment, clarity, and the courage to enforce boundaries without guilt. The anima nurtures depth, receptivity, and an intuitive understanding of self and others. Together, they form an internal compass, guiding decisions and shaping interactions with integrity. Emotional triggers, once sources of turmoil, are now signals to observe, reflect, and respond consciously. The world, with its distractions, judgments, and fleeting accolades, no longer dictates the rhythm of the heart. The woman's energy flows from within, radiant, steady, and sovereign, unshaken by the pull of external validation. This mastery of self does not isolate. It liberates. The relationships that emerge are chosen rather than needed, reciprocated rather than demanded, resonant rather than compulsory. The patterns of attraction are understood, the compulsions of the ego dissolved, and the longings of the heart honored without dependency. Emotional freedom, once a distant aspiration, becomes tangible in every thought, every breath, every conscious choice. Presence replaces performance. Patience replaces urgency, and self-possession replaces a hunger for approval. A woman who knows her worth does not pursue. She chooses.